On Drag Race, the lip sync is supposed to be between the two bottom performers of the week, most of the time. But sometimes the storyline is just too juicy that they can't help themselves, and they make it whatever they want. That's what reality TV is all about, and that's what the Drag Race producers do. If you haven't seen my first two videos for this topic, go back and take a look. This is 5 times Drag Race Forced to Lip Sync 3.0. In my first video on this topic, I said there are a number of different ways that producers might want to force a lip sync. The one I'll be talking about first is when the guest judge has some sort of a connection with a queen on stage. For Canada Season 1, we know the judging was all over the place, but one of my favorite episodes of the entire season was the Not Sorry About It Girl Group Challenge. For this challenge, we had the queens competing against each other in girl groups on the Not Sorry About It song, where they just basically roasted each other the whole time. We had some absolutely savage verses, including the one from Boa, which I think is one of the best girl group verses of all time. But the one that I want to be talking about today is Tynomi Banks. Tynomi was consistently underrated by the judges and also was a little bit of a struggle on her first season of Canada's Drag Race. She, though, had a background as a background dancer. So she was one of the background dancers for Deborah Cox, who happened to be the guest judge that week for the Girl Group Challenge. We even got commentary from Deborah herself saying that the Tynomi we saw on stage just wasn't the Tynomi that she remembered. The funny thing is, though, not a lot of queens did amazing in that Girl Group Challenge. From what I read online, they only gave the queens one day to know all the dance moves for this, so that's why we got some queens like Jimbo and Ilona giving us absolutely nothing in that Girl Group Challenge. Tynomi was not one of the better queens, but she certainly wasn't the worst of the group. Anastasia was the other queen that they decided to stick in the bottom with her just because I think they weren't getting a storyline from her. But they knew when Deborah Cox was there, she was either going to win the challenge or she was going to be in the bottom to perform a Deborah Cox song that she probably performed on stage with Deborah Cox in front of her. And of course she won the lip sync, because how heartless do you have to be to send her home after that? Similar to what we saw last time with Cheryl Cole and Cheryl Hole, we got Tynomi lip-syncing for her former boss to a Deborah Cox song. I would say this storyline doesn't happen that often, because how often do these queens have a connection with a celebrity or something on the panel? Instead, what we get most of the time is when there's a connection or a feud or something between two queens that they want to resolve with a lip sync. The next example I want to be talking about is from Drag Race Season 15 with Lucy LaDuca and Luxx Noir London. Lucy was kind of given the delusional edit during Season 15 simply because she thought she should have been doing better than she was in the competition. I do think she was underrated by the judges a couple of different times, and the episode I'll be talking about now was certainly one of those cases. For the Season 15 Makeover Challenge, we had the queens making over teachers for Teacher Appreciation Week. Lucy had one of the best makeovers that week, and we actually heard some tea from backstage that the producer actually thought Lucy's makeover partner was Lucy. Luxx, on the other hand, did struggle a bit. Her looks were great, but unfortunately there wasn't much family resemblance between the two. They didn't even look like they were related. Luxx probably deserved to be in the bottom that week, but I'm not sure Lucy deserved to be there. This was the producer's last chance to pit these two against each other before we got to the top 4 finale challenges. So they decided, hey, Lucy, we don't want you in the top 4, let's stick you in the bottom with Luxx Noir London. The producers knew they could resolve the conflict between these two queens with one final lip sync smackdown, Luxx taking out her nemesis, Lucy, and Lucy being sent off just before the finale. On Drag Race, we often see that sort of negative storyline end in a lip sync, but what about two friends? When you have a close connection to a queen, unless you're either killing it or the other one is killing it, you are probably going to end up in a lip sync together for some reason. We saw it in the previous video with something like Brooke and Vanjie, where they were getting pretty close, and they knew they had to end that with a lip sync before the end of the season. Probably the closest relationship that we saw on Drag Race Season 16, other than Nymphia and Plain Jane, was that of Xunami and Morphine. They both were very close throughout the entire season, so when they both flopped the Snatch game, they knew this was the moment where they would put those two in the bottom two. For the Snatch game, we saw Xunami play the Gold Tooth Fairy and Morphine play Anna Delvey. We also saw Nymphia's iconically bad Jane Goodall impression, which, I don't know, I laughed at, but it certainly wasn't a home run. I've heard people say that Nymphia should have been in the bottom. I've also heard people say that Nymphia was saved by her runway, but regardless, it didn't matter because Xunami and Morphine's connection was too close, and having them both in the low position meant that they were probably going to be lip syncing regardless of how well Nymphia did or how great her runway was. For this reason, we got the emotional lip sync to I Wanna Dance With Somebody between Xunami and Morphine. You know these queens have a close connection when they decide to dance together during the lip sync. It really seemed like Xunami wanted her friend Morphine to continue in the competition, so she let her have her moment, while Xunami stood back. She lip synced, but she let Morphine continue. And while most of the time the judges want you running to Twitter to express your outrage and get people clicking and get people screaming, sometimes they want you to go online and say what a beautiful moment that lip sync was. And honestly, this was a pretty heartfelt lip sync. And I'm glad that we got Xunami and Morphine together, because we got this moment. While negative conflict between queens that's created during the season happens all the time and is often resolved with a lip sync, you don't often see an employer and an employee lip sync on Drag Race. We got that for the very first time on Drag Race Down Under Season 1 when Electric Shock competed against her boss Kita Mean to Untouched by the Veronicas. This was the infamous Drag Race Down Under talent show episode, which has gone down as the most poorly rated episodes in Drag Race history. I don't want to talk much about the queen's talents because you should watch the episodes and see for yourself, but here is a quick Kita and Elektra probably had the third and second best talents of the week. Obviously, Scarlett was going to win, but when you're competing against a single balloon animal and eating food, you probably shouldn't end up in the bottom because your wig is messy. But that's what happened for Elektra, and they knew they wanted to get rid of this queen that they had been forcing into the bottom all season and have her be taken out by her boss, Kita Mean. The interesting thing about Drag Race Down Under Season 1 is that all the New Zealand queens had a connection to Kita Mean as employees. Both Anita Wiglet and Electra Shock worked for Kita in their home bar in New Zealand, and they knew that this was a juicy storyline that they could exploit later on when the producers caught hold. So for the last lip sync before the finale, Elektra and Kita lip synced to Untouched by the Veronicas, and Kita sent home her employee Elektra. For some reason, the judges on Season 1 of Down Under just were out to get Electra Shock. No matter how well she did in the challenge, the judges always found something that was wrong with her look, was something that was wrong with her performance. In the Girl Group Challenge, she performed too well, and she was put into the bottom for that reason. So they knew they needed to get rid of her before they got to that finale because they were not going to crown Elektra. And what better way to do that than having her boss send her home? A big reason why the producers want to force queens into a lip sync is because they want a big TV moment. They want conflict and they want resolution with a lip sync. The very first time that I think they wanted to make this TV moment happen was all the way back on the very first season of Drag Race when BeBe Zahara Benet lip-synced against Ongina, the two frontrunners of the season in the Makeover Challenge. For the Makeover Challenge, the queens had to make over female wrestlers and turn them into members of their drag family. This was the first time that we'd ever seen a makeover, so we didn't really know what the judges were looking for when it came to this type of challenge. We then saw Rebecca Glasscock come out with 2 identical cocktail dresses and 2 messy wigs. This was enough though to earn her the win because the producers wanted to keep Rebecca around as conflict for the remainder of the season. Ongina and BB didn't do amazing with their makeovers, but I don't think both of them deserve to be lip syncing there. If anything, Rebecca should have been competing against one of them in the bottom 2. But when the producers saw BB and Ongina here, they knew that they could put them into the bottom together and have a huge TV moment where one of the frontrunners goes home before the finale. I remember watching this at the time, and the shock of seeing Ongina go here was almost too much. This was the first time that I went to look online for message boards to see what people were saying about Drag Race. And that's exactly what the producers wanted to. In the days before Twitter and Instagram, people were right on Facebook yelling at each other about who should have gone home in this lip sync. We even saw RuPaul leave the judges panel because she didn't know who to choose. She had to consult with the producers to decide who of these frontrunners was going to stick around and eventually maybe win the season. The Drag Race producers have always done a great job of creating drama on their seasons. And this was the very first example where they saved the queen, who they knew could bring the drama for the remainder of the season, and they stuck the 2 frontrunners in the bottom 2, with one of them going home. And we are still talking about it to this day. And those were 5 more times that Drag Race forced a lip sync between 2 queens. Did I miss any? Are there any more times that you think a queen was forced into the bottom for a storyline reason? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned for more stuff here on Wild Spear.